The Gulf of America can hardly be called a quiet place. Huge amounts of oil and gas are extracted here, and the Mississippi carries tons of agricultural waste that pollute the Gulf's waters. And now there's this. Off the coast of Texas, digging has started. A bunch of specialized ships are dredging up silt, sand, clay, and everything else that makes up the seabed. Over 459 million cubic feet of soil has already been removed. And the total length of the area where engineers and heavy equipment are hard at work stretches nearly 50 miles. And let's not forget about the money, because when it comes to mega projects, that's something you definitely can't overlook. Lifting all that material is expected to cost around $1.1 billion. Numbers like these aren't exactly a surprise, since we're talking about one of the largest dredging projects in U.S. history. And strange as it may sound, it's all being done to reach Mexico. Why? We'll get into that in a moment. In 2024, the U.S. and Mexico set a new record. Their two-way trade hit $840 billion. That's not just a big number, it's the largest trade volume the U.S. has ever had with any country. Not even trade with China or Canada, which used to hold the top two spots, reaches that level anymore. Mexico has taken the lead and doesn't look like it's giving it up anytime soon. And that's not all that surprising. Around 80% of all Mexican exports go to the U.S., and more than 40% of everything Mexico imports comes from the U.S. These aren't just numbers, they show just how deeply connected the two countries are. And what's interesting is that this connection isn't stuck at one level, trade keeps growing. Even the pandemic didn't slow things down for long. After a dip in 2020, trade bounced back and has been breaking records every year since. A huge part of this trade goes through the land border. And really, why not if you can move goods from one country to another just by using a truck? For example, that can be done through a border crossing in the city of Laredo. The only thing is, this place is known for one thing: massive traffic jams. The reason is over 3 million trucks came through Laredo from Mexico in 2024 alone. That's more than half of the total land traffic. On top of the traffic jams, there's strict and complicated bureaucracy and other issues tied to land crossings, plus shipping overall isn't slowing down. Nearshoring's gaining momentum now, with factories moving from Asia to Mexico to be closer to the final destination in the U.S. In the end, countries are increasingly turning their eyes to the Gulf of America, a route where massive container ships like the Neo-Panamax can carry up to 15,000 TEUs, or 20-foot containers, packed with all sorts of goods. Basically, it's the perfect way to move a ton of stuff quickly and without delays. And right near the border, there's even a strong candidate for handling different kinds of ships: the Port of Houston. Let's start by looking at the numbers. The Port of Houston is the undisputed U.S. leader by tonnage. In 2024, its public terminals handled 53 million tons of cargo. If you're looking for something to compare that to, here comes France's most famous landmark. In 1 year, the port moved the equivalent weight of more than 5,000 Eiffel Towers. And that number keeps growing every year. When it comes to containers, this port ranks 5th in the U.S. by volume. In 2024, it saw more than 4.1 million TEUs pass through. At the same time, 74% of all container traffic in the Gulf of America moves through Houston. It's not just a port, it's one of the main maritime gateways to the U.S. The Port of Houston is especially closely tied to Mexico. In 2023, the port did trade with its southern neighbor, totaling $24.9 billion. And that number's steady. Trade between Houston and Mexico has been in the top ranks for several years now. And yes, Neo-Panamax ships are already passing through the Port of Houston. The problem is they do it with a lot of difficulties and aren't fully loaded. The ships have to go through the Houston Ship Channel. Its width in many places is just 525 feet. That sounds okay, but how did two giant container ships pass each other in such a narrow corridor? In the end, captains resort to a trick known as the Texas chicken. They deliberately steer toward each other and use the water currents to avoid a collision. It sounds impressive, but basically it's an accident that just hasn't happened yet. There are also problems with the depth. In many sections, it's 45 feet, while fully loaded Neo-Panamax ships have a draft of 50 feet. You get it, right? The Houston Ship Channel doesn't let these new type vessels be used to their full potential. Now imagine that every year there are more ships, more containers, and trade with Mexico is generally growing. And all of this has to go through a canal that doesn't allow the largest vessels to pass safely and fully loaded. In that case, the Port of Houston can no longer be seen as the most efficient solution to replace land routes or as a place capable of handling trade with the most suitable ships. That's exactly why excavation work has started in the waters near Houston. To be more specific, Project 11 is underway. First off, you might be wondering why number 11? Here's the answer. This is actually the 11th modification of the Houston Ship Channel. What's more, it's the biggest and most labor-intensive project yet. Even planning took over 10 years. By 2022, all the documents, approvals, and calculations were ready. Dredgers hit the water and started digging. The goal is to widen the narrow parts of the channel. For example, the plan was to widen the section near Galveston Bay from 525 to 699 feet. This means bigger ships can pass through more smoothly and safely without extra maneuvering. Also, the upper section of the channel will be deepened to 46 feet. Overall, the changes will affect 40 miles out of 58, meaning the majority of the whole system. It's worth mentioning right away that the project team considered that this work could cause water traffic jams since there are no alternate routes. Because of this, to avoid slowing down progress and causing chaos on the water, the project was split into 6 segments and 12 construction packages. This allowed work to proceed at several sites simultaneously while keeping everything under control. By 2023, the first 2 key segments, 1A and 2, were completed. The Port of Houston and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers worked together smoothly and on schedule. These stages showed that the plan works. Contractors, equipment, and logistics all performed exactly as planned. In the winter of 2024, the third section, segment 1B, was completed. It stretches nearly 8 miles from Redfish Reef to Bayport and is considered one of the most important parts of the project. That's why heavy dredgers were deployed for the job. You could say it's the elite of American dredging: Avalon from Curtin Maritime, C.R. McCaskill from Weeks Marine, and General Arnold from Callan Marine. Each of them ensures efficient material lifting from the bottom, and everything on board is top-notch too. For example, there are modern navigation systems. They literally track every spot of the excavation. Errors are minimal and accuracy is critical. Modern cargo ships don't forgive shallow spots and narrow passages. In the end, each dredger effectively handled the task and the huge volumes of soil that had to be extracted. Besides, in the dredging work, both for this segment and the entire project, slightly less advanced colleagues take part, self-propelled hold dredgers, which can independently collect the extracted soil in their holds. Mechanical dredgers also work on the project. These are floating systems used for very dense soils and when maneuvering of cutter suction dredgers is limited. Now imagine, Curtin Maritime alone has reported lifting about 134 million cubic feet of material from the seabed as part of the work on this segment of Project 11. If that doesn't sound impressive, then keep in mind that Galveston Bay has already lost 432 million cubic feet of what used to be on its bottom during work on 2 segments of the project. The work is currently underway on segment 1C. This is the stretch from Bayport to Barber's Cut. It's expected to be finished in 2025, somewhere between summer and autumn. This is the final section of the channel that Port Houston oversees directly. After that, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will take charge of dredging, widening, and all the rest. When will the project be finished? Well, according to the plan, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is supposed to complete the remaining part of the canal by 2029. And you know, deadlines often get pushed back, especially in complex projects with lots of risks involved. Project 11, to remind you, is already the 11th attempt to change the canal, so everything's pretty well worked out, which means the risks are minimal. Besides, the project is so important for boosting trade with Mexico and other countries that everyone involved will clearly try to stick to the schedule. First of all, there won't be any Texas chickens. That's probably how you could describe the results once Project 11 is completed. To put it another way, widening the channel to 699 feet in key sections isn't just a pretty number on the project plans. It's real room for big ships that used to have to maneuver on the edge of what's allowed. Now they'll be able to pass each other comfortably, even with oncoming traffic, without having to calculate inches between holes. The result? Improved efficiency, fewer holdups, and the Port of Houston becoming a preferred choice for trade with the U.S. and Mexico. Of course, we can't forget about deepening the channel, since that's almost the most important part of Project 11. When the work is done, its depth at key sections will reach 46 feet. Sounds great, but as we've already mentioned, the largest Neo-Panamax ships at full load have a draft of 50 feet. So it turns out those container ships still won't be able to get through the Houston Channel. Nevertheless, thanks to Project 11, Neo-Panamax ships will be able to move through the canal with a heavier load than they do now. It's said they'll be able to carry 15 to 17,000 TEU. And that's a serious boost in efficiency, which can really ease the pressure on overland trade routes with Mexico. And of course, this will allow the U.S. to keep expanding its trade with its southern neighbor. In the end, the U.S. will receive not just an upgraded canal, but a true economic lifeline. Calculations show that Project 11 could add as much as $200 billion per year to the nation's GDP. This translates into not only higher trade volume, but also reduced expenses for shipping firms, quicker logistics, and a boost in the region's attractiveness to new investors. The project also creates a significant number of jobs, and not just in construction. Sure, dredging and infrastructure upgrades provide thousands of openings right away, but the main impact will be seen later. Shipments will increase, demand for logistics will grow, warehouses will expand, and manufacturing and export companies will ramp up. Estimates show that just in Texas, 252,000 new jobs will be created, and across the country, over 3.37 million. All this makes Project 11 not just a way to ease the load on land routes and boost trade with Mexico, but a key tool for an economic leap forward for both the U.S. and Texas specifically. Of course, there was some dissatisfaction, but in our case today, the frustration didn't start with Project 11 at all. As we already mentioned, the Houston Ship Channel expansion had been expanded 10 times by 2022, and all that time, whatever was dredged from the bottom was fully or partially dumped right near residential areas like Galena Park. The engineering corps, which lifted the material from the bottom and then piled it up, always insisted, no problems whatsoever, everything's fine. However, the test results from 2019 told a different story. Pesticides and heavy metals like zinc, cadmium, copper, lead, mercury, and nickel were found, all way above the benchmarks. Basically, those piles at the bottom had been collecting all the local chemicals for years, just sitting there quietly, and then someone pulled them up and dumped them on shore, right next to residential areas. And these spots, by the way, are exactly where everything dug up from the bottom ended up. It's all covered in green now, but most likely underneath it all, there's still a concentration of harmful substances. But that's not all. On windy days, fine toxic dust can blow straight into residential neighborhoods, schools, and playgrounds. This is especially dangerous for people whose health is already compromised, and there are plenty of them in industrial areas. There's another issue too, flooding. These embankments can interfere with normal water drainage. During heavy rains, which have become more frequent in recent years, the water simply doesn't drain fast enough and floods the streets. And if the water starts to erode the embankments themselves, pollutants can leak into nearby streams, ditches, and eventually into people's homes. And then the cycle starts all over again. Pollution, illness, frustration. They've officially scheduled to dump nearly 883 million cubic feet of material at local sites by 2050, and 423 million cubic feet have already been brought up from the bottom during the 11th expansion, which kicked off in 2022. But let's look at the project from a different angle. According to the claims, 100% of the non-muddy material from Galveston Bay is being used to create and restore natural ecosystems. That soil is used to build around 10 acres of new islands where birds can nest and feed. Another big portion will go to wetlands, about 790 acres of them, and it's not just some pretty environmental plan that'll stay on paper. These wetlands actually improve water quality and help reduce flooding, which is no small thing for Houston with its heavy rains and hurricanes. Besides, the project includes restoring oyster reefs covering between 324 and 376 acres. These reefs act like natural filters. They clean the water and support biodiversity, including fish and shellfish that the local fishing industry depends on. What about the dredging machines themselves? It's hard to think of them as eco-friendly as they stir up the seabed. And then there are also the emissions. No need to worry about that. Some of the systems in Project 11 use modern dredgers with Tier 4 standard engines. That's one of the cleanest emission levels approved at the federal level. They also mentioned in the project documents that once the work is done, ships will be able to move through the canal faster and more efficiently without the delays and tricky maneuvers that used to waste time and fuel. As a result, nitrogen oxide emissions and other pollutants are expected to drop by 3 to 7%. It might not seem like much, but it'll still have an impact on the area's environment. By the way, the project fits into the broader environmental strategy of the Port of Houston. It's not just about building docks and warehouses here. They're taking a systemic approach to sustainable development. The port's already cut its carbon emissions by 55% since 2016 and has set goals to reach full carbon neutrality by 2050. Over the years, thousands of acres of wetlands and protected areas have been created in the region, including through older restoration programs. So the Port of Houston really is working to make its operations less irritating to locals and eco-activists. But maybe we focused a bit too much on the U.S. Is Mexico doing anything to boost trade? Actually, yes. The country's actively working to expand its maritime trade, both with the U.S. and other nations. One of the most ambitious projects is a large-scale modernization of the Port of Veracruz, one of the oldest ports in the country and a key hub for trade with the U.S. Right now, construction's underway there, aiming to completely transform its capabilities. They poured about 7 billion pesos into the project. That's roughly $410 million. The goal is simple, to nearly triple the capacity, from 28 to 95 million tons of cargo per year. To make that happen, they're building a new terminal and, just in case, the longest breakwater in all of Latin America, stretching a full 2.7 miles. The facility was expected to go live in April 2025. Another key player is the Port of Altamira, also located on the Gulf of America coast, which is rapidly expanding through a range of development projects. This isn't just about local efforts, it's part of a national strategy. And what's important is that it's not only about building new docks, but also switching to modern standards. Automation, digital monitoring, and electronic cargo tracking systems. Major programs like the National Infrastructure Initiative and the Special Ports and Fleet Program are on board. Their goal is to bring Mexico's ports up to the level of top global hubs. And of course, to support the U.S.'s push to ease pressure on land routes and boost trade. Right now, the joint efforts by the U.S. and Mexico look very promising. Will they be able to pull it off? We'll see in a couple of years.